All right. Hey, this is Chris with Infinite Realities, and today I get to try not to revert back to being a 12-year-old because I am with one of my all-time favorites, one of the all-time greats, Mr. Chris Claremont. How are you, sir?
Well, hi there, peasants. How are you all doing? Here in New York, we just sun out in the sun with a really fake Southern accent and my shades on.
You know what?
Though actually, the way to do it is with a proper accent, except that Brian Bolland will fly across the Atlantic and whack me upside my head for, "You haven't done that for 50 years. Don't push your luck."
Like, don't stop doing that. Yeah, because
what, being an a-hole? Ooh.
Well, how have you been doing through all of this?
Basically sitting in my writing room, writing prose. I mean, there's nothing like having a global shutdown to give a writer inspiration. And I've been, adding pages to a book that's been sitting on my desk for far too long.
Is it a book you can talk about, or is it something that's still in that gestational period?
Well, for me, everything is in gestational period until it actually sells, and then it's in more gestation until it actually comes out. But no, it's I guess, contemporary dark fantasy, sort of maybe derived from concepts I've used before. Okay. And it's prose, which means I don't need an artist. It just takes a hell of a lot longer.
It's all on you at that point, right?
Yeah. There's no tactful way to say it. It's all on me, and part of the reason I stay in the city is because out here, the dog is here, the boys are here, and and Beth is here, so there's lots of distraction. Whereas in the city, I have none other than cleaning the house. Sure.
Well, we got you for 30 minutes.
Well, actually, I shouldn't say nothing, because at 7:00 each night, I and everybody else, especially since we're a block from Methodist Hospital, we go outside and bang on pots and pans to say thank you.
That's fantastic that you're taking part in that. That's one of those stories that we hear from far away that has been inspiring. So to know that you're a part of that,
the interesting thing is a lot of the cars parked on our block are people working at Methodist, nurses and doctors. They get their own parking lot, but nurses and general staff. And it's only natural to say thank you. This is not only the most terrifying in a lot of ways event to have happened in modern lifetime, but it's also one that's proven to, it's heartbreaking to see that there are physicians, there are nurses who are succumbing to fatigue and just horribly either getting sick or in one case in New York, taking their own lives. And that shouldn't happen. There should be no situation that justifies, that causes any of these people to take their own lives. And even more heartbreaking is the fact that it seems very challenging for people in authority to understand that. And I hope that changes sooner rather than later, for everyone's sake.
Well, that's the hope.
That's my polemic for the next half hour. Sorry.
No, you're good. But I feel like that's an ongoing theme of your work. And I'm someone that's read your work a long time, is God knows that's a theme of X-Men. And I wanted to talk about God Loves Man Kills today because it does seem that's a people standing up to power and people standing up to those who are abusing power.
Well, you have to understand, I met Stan when I was a functional kid. I got him, I was working for Marvel my first year of university. And the key there is hit the classic mantra: with great power comes great responsibility. And you have to find a way to balance that, or worse, to figure out exactly what that means. And it doesn't always require superpowers. Sometimes it just requires knowledge and being in the right place at the right time and looking out for one another. The most heartbreaking moment of Spider-Man over the first 10, 12 years was the death of Captain Stacy.
Right.
And you look at that and you think, I mean, yeah, the death of Uncle Ben was hard, but as with the death of Thunderbird, it was right off the bat. You didn't know him. You got to see the consequences, but you didn't know the character himself. You learned it sort of as you went along. But with Captain Stacy, you got to see him become more and more a part and more important to Peter's life, especially as his relationship with Gwen became more powerful.
Right.
And to lose that father figure, to discover in the process that Captain Stacy has known all along who he is, who Spider-Man is, it hit home. And I think it's something that has certainly with me, has carried on over every story I've written since, that you have to understand the responsibilities and the limitations of power and then how you deal with them. And I guess for me, that always kind of manifests the most dealing with adolescence, because at least when I was writing, primarily, being a teenager meant you got a second chance, especially when you were a young teenager. If you made a misstep, people were inclined to say, okay, we get it. You screwed up. Don't do it again. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously changed over the last certainly 20 years. But for me, that learning curve is much more exciting and much more interesting as a writer, and I would hope to the readers, than seeing the same characters as 30-year-olds going through that, because I can't help thinking, you haven't learned already? I mean, give me a break. You haven't figured out how to make the choice. And if you take that away from the characters, again, for me as a reader, they become that much less interesting.
Well, I'm in the process right now of revisiting your run on New Mutants, and it's interesting you mentioned that theme, because I'm 10 issues into my reread, and that is a theme that is hit almost every issue in those first 10 issues, at least, is these are kids making mistake, and it's Professor Xavier giving them permission to make mistakes and encouraging, like, no, you're fine, keep going.
Well, but more importantly, it's them learning how to deal with it. You know, and especially learning how to deal with it, looking at their backgrounds. Sam coming out of Appalachia.
Yep.
Having worked in a coal mine, having his father having died in a coal accident, but also seeing people around him with black lung, with collapsing mines, the whole 9 yards. Danny coming out of being an American, being an indigenous person, and trying to be proud of it, but losing her family, losing her grandfather, wanting to stand up for herself, getting used to the fact that she was now among the, for want of a better term, from her perspective, ruling class, and not liking it a bit. Bobby coming up from Brazil, being a part of the ruling class, and yet because of the color of his skin, being an outsider. Rain just being totally creeped out because she's a werewolf, and didn't go over well because she can't find a way to balance her beliefs as a Christian, even though she had a nutty pastor, with the fact that, oh my gosh, now I've got friends who aren't afraid of me because I can change shapes. How do I deal with that? And then you end up with Ileana, who actually is a demon inside and trying not to yield to it. It's, you go down the list, and again, being kids, they're almost guaranteed to make mistakes, but being kids in a school, they have to learn how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And yet each time they try and deal with it, hopefully things get worse. Yoo-hoo!
Well, before everything shut down, we were scheduled to get a revisitation of, for my money,
God Loves Man Kills.
the best X-Men, God Loves Man Kills. And so in preparation for this, I revisited it, and God Loves Man Kills is what I hand to people if they're asking what is the distillation of all the themes and everything that makes X-Men X-Men. I hand them God Loves Man Kills. And
thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good.
Thank you. And thank you. And B, that was exactly what the book was intended to do. My mantra is, if you only have an opportunity to read one X-Men, that's the one. Why? Because it tells you everything you know about the characters, their life, the where they live, who they are living there, but primarily as well the gist of the conflict, not simply between Magneto and Reverend Stryker, but between Charlie and Magneto. Mm-hmm. And in the end, you discover that the struggle has nothing to do with defeating the bad guy. It has everything to do with making the primal choice as a person. And it plays some games with the reality in that the people who are being taught, surprisingly, are the teachers themselves.
Yes.
By their pupils. Because how best to show that you are having the proper effect as a teacher than by having your pupils turn around and nail you on the same, with the same words that you've used, but that you are coming to doubt.
Well, and what's great about it is it culminates with even Xavier doubting his method.
Yes.
There's a moment in the end where I still read it, and I've read this book multiple times. There's actual a moment where I still believe that he might take Magneto's hand at the end.
He was about to.
And to me, it wasn't this was formative for me. It wasn't black and white, good versus evil. It seemed so real, and both arguments had validity to it. Mm-hmm. One of the most complicated things as a young reader for me, and even now, I'm a middle-aged man, and it's still a complicated superhero comic for me. So,
well, that's the interesting. I find that an interesting paradigm in terms of where the X-Men stood in the mid '80s with God Loves, and where they stand today with everyone living on Genosha and mm-hmm. Charlie wearing his silly hat, and apparently he has made the choice that he almost made then.
Yeah.
And seeing what the dynamic is of the challenges, of the characters, of the stories, it's an interesting question. Which is the more lasting and resonant choice and sequence of stories? This is more a question for you and your customers than for me. I know my answer, sure. But that's the difference. I guess one can see in the generational shift between the world of the mid '80s and the world of the late teens, I should say.
I'll be honest with you. Reading the new X-Men stuff, I haven't thought about what that says about society, because to me, X-Men has always been a reflection. So I'm going to have to digest that one.
Well, I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it in terms of who they are as people, where they're going as people, what choices they are making. And the nice thing I find is the opportunity to revisit God Loves in terms of how I approached the framing sequence was, I suppose, my way of stating my opinion of where the world and the characters are today. Because the focal character in the framing sequence is Kitty Pryde, because the young kid is also a Kate, and it gets way too complicated. My apologies for the lawnmower in the background. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you fine. You're good.
It's Saturday. This is what they do out on Long Island. They mow the flippin' lawn. Mind you, if he's mowing our lawn, I will shoot him.
Well, let me ask you this. Your run on X-Men took Magneto from being kind of like a dime store Doctor Doom to being one of not just most complicated villains, but one of the most complicated characters in comicdom.
Yes.
What was the catalyst for that? Why? How did you decide to take the character that direction?
I'm a writer. That's what I do. No, I'm not being facetious, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck.
Not taking.
I have no interest in two-dimensional cliches, even though I can more than once trip over them. If I ever, for example, went into arcade with the same degree of focus, you would probably find a lot more about him than just, I run Murder World, and I deal so well with people that my associates, Mr. Locke and Ms. What's-Her-Face, are actually constructs. They're audio animatronics. But with Magneto, I felt if one is going to be Charlie's core adversary, if one is going to form a brotherhood of, God help us, evil mutants, why? And then that question led me, okay, how old is he? Well, looks to be about 40, 50, Charlie's age. They are simpatico, because bear in mind, this is 1975.
Right.
Okay, so that means 75 minus 50, he's born in maybe the early 30s. What happened? He's obviously Caucasian, seems to be European. What happened in Europe of significance to an adolescent in the 30s and 40s? Okay, then he's involved in the Shoah. What does that mean? And off we go. And that's why, Charlie's the references to Charlie being in military service, okay, that puts him in Korea. What did he do in Korea? So that by the time they meet in Cairo or in Egypt in the mid-50s, Aurora at that point was a kid.
Right.
Charlie's a young man before he hasn't lost his legs yet. So from my way of looking at things, he has his adventure in Cairo, ends up going from Cairo to Israel, meets Magneto, everything moves on from there. But that's the point from my perspective is, how do we find a way to make them real and by extension more identifiable to the readership? So for want of a better choice, Jean's father, Aurora's father is a reporter who's killed in the bombings during the Franco-British-Israeli War of 1956. So that defines her life. Jean's father is a teacher at the university I went to. College I went to.
Okay.
Yeah, Bard College.
Nice.
Which used to drive the college president crazy, because everybody was putting up all these X-Men posters all over the school and said, what is this? Why are people promoting this comic book? Until, of course, he discovered, it's set at Bard, in the neighborhood, it's like, oh, so students read the book, therefore we, haha. It's not like it's, for example, say Harvard, which has its own endowment of magnificent proportions, Bard, not so much. So every cheap bit of advertising, especially when it's free, I figured would do them some good.
Well, question,
as I wander way far afield.
No, you're good. We're getting comments now on the stream, and people have contacted us leading up, talking about how important you were, just on a literary basis. Who was important?
Dang, it's always, why are they using past tense? I am.
I should say how important you are. What are your literary figures? What literary figures had an impact on Chris Claremont?
Oh, there's this English playwright back in Elizabeth's era, Elizabeth I's era. See, everybody's thinking, oh, Shakespeare. And I'm going, no, Marlowe.
Yeah?
No, a little bit of both. Basic classic literature. Writers in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Heartbreakingly, Mickey Spillane, because I always kind of appreciated the efficiency of his storytelling. Not that I could ever match it. Every time I tried to do a short story, it would turn into an endless novel, which I then incorporated into the X-Men. Hollywood directors and the John Ford, for example.
Okay.
Occasionally Hitchcock, depending on the film. Kurosawa.
Yes.
Well, because his visual storytelling was such that you really didn't need to speak Japanese or read the subtitles. The action was clear from the pictures. And to me, for me, writing comics is trying to bring that kind of passion and that kind of excitement to life, except doing it with storyboards. The key thing about comics, the way I guess I learned it from Stan, or more importantly, learned it from the films that I love, is that what you are seeing in a 20-page comic is 100 images, roughly. Which is great because I'm pointing you in the right direction, but as the reader, it's your job to fill in everything that happens between the panels in the white space, which can be, again, depending on who's reading it, the story could go one way, it could go another. These characters could be talking one direction or the other. A character may make a decision on panel that goes one way, but between the panels, you might have a totally different and equally valid opinion. So for me, it was partly tell a great story, but as importantly, make it as interactive as possible for the readers. They're part of this equation too. They need to be involved. They need to care. They need to have fun. They need to be appalled,
right,
either with the story or with the writer. But regardless of how you put it, they need to be pulled in. Whether I approve of the death of Jean, it was totally justified. Claremont, you killed my favorite character. Don't worry, in 6 years she'll come back, and then we can all complain all over again. That's it. It is about creating in these 20 pages the reality of a world that you see reflections of your life. I hesitate to say real life.
No.
In them that makes you want to be a part of it, but that gives you ideas and takes you in directions that maybe you haven't thought of, and that hopefully are fun.
Well, I have a question here from Chris Marquez. Hi, Chris. Carol Danvers.
A lot of Chris's going on around here.
A lot of Chris's. This is like the confluence of Chris's here. He says, Carol Danvers had such a whirlwind of trials and tribulations during her early years. How important was it for you to have Carol reconcile with her abusive past and confront her Avenger teammates for failing to protect her?
Totally natural, a totally logical. I mean, well, but that was because I had significant problems as a reader with Avengers 200. The difference was I had a platform. And I guess maybe Jim thought he owed me for Jean, you know, because I pitched him an alternate. Well, not for the resurrection, that is. Because I pitched him an alternative that I felt would have been much more satisfying, but he'd already given his word to the guy, to X Factor, to bring her back. But that's a totally different story, and we won't go into that. The thing with Carol was, I mean, she was a zoomie. She was, okay, 30, but she was a major in the Air Force. Given the fact that she could have been in the service for like 12 years, looking at her career, holy cow. I mean, she was a secret agent. She was chief of security at JFK, not JFK, at Kennedy Space Center. She was this, she was that. Wow, what hasn't she done? You know, but as she herself put it, she wakes up one morning and finds herself 6 months pregnant, and everyone thinks it's wonderful. And then when she gives birth to Magnus, and he does this whole spiel, and it's like, I love you. I did this because it was the only way I could be with you. And it's like, really? Yeah. Really? Are we having a Joe Biden moment here? I can't believe I said that.
I know.
But I mean, I know of no woman for whom that was any kind of moment or situation that would be relevant. But then, you know, come on, they're the Avengers. You take all this at face value, and then at the end, as happened, they got married, they went off to wherever Magnus came from and lived, quote unquote, happily ever after. And I thought, what the Dickens? And so I went to Jim and I said, no, I want to fix this. This is so wrong. And I explained to him why I felt it was so wrong. And, you know, he gave me the green light. And so I did the Avengers Annual to basically bring Carol back, but not as Ms. Marvel or as Captain. What was she?
She was Miss Marvel at the time.
She was Miss Marvel then, because didn't want to put her back where she came from, because to me, if I could not trust my teammates, how do I go back and join them? But being Ms. Marvel, where do I go from there? So essentially, and I also wanted to give turn Rogue into a total badass. Mm-hmm. So it was a logical and entirely solipsistic sequence of events that suited my needs as being in the X-Men. But then with Michael Golden, we came up with the most, I mean, I'm sorry, Michael is just about the most brilliant, one of the most brilliant artists / storytellers I know. And if you haven't ever wondered what I'm talking about, all you have to do is look at this is my classic iteration, look at the page where we see Lieutenant What's-Her-Face, the police detective, walking into the hospital. It's like a 6-panel page. She walks into the hospital, but she's on panel left. On panel right, you've got it's a cliche, a nun, a nurse, a cop, and a kid. And I looked at those 4 characters and I thought, I've got to give them dialogue, because that's a story waiting to be told. So I gave them a story. I gave them dialogue. And it came back to haunt me years later when I created Gabby. I mean, when I created Madeline Pryor. Because the kid says, I'm Maddie Pryor. I was sick, but I got better. No, I was Maddie Pryor. I'm a grown-up person. I was dead, but I got better. Oops. But then you go through, and the second panel is her coming up to Carol Danvers. I'm not Carol Danvers, sorry. Her coming up to Spider-Woman, who's having a cup of coffee, but she's sticking to the wall. She's sitting on her heels, and she's stuck like a meter or two up the wall. Why? Because she's Spider-Man. That's how she relates to life. Peter would do exactly the same thing. They keep talking, and then a nurse walks in, bearing in mind, this is like 1980, 81. Yep. It's a black woman who's a doctor, who looks like a doctor. She's wearing, yes, she's wearing a white coat, but those are ugly clothes underneath. And if you've ever seen doctors in the 80s, they generally wore ugly clothes. Why? Because they're going to get puked on. She's in an ER. It's like you don't go to work wearing fancy clothes. You go in comfortable scrubs. And then, it's like you work all the way through, and every panel tells you something about character, tells you something about the story. It moves you forward on every level. And that, for me, is the hallmark of what makes Michael's work superior, but also of what makes a story work. Every panel has to move you forward. Every panel has to be essential. It doesn't necessarily have to involve people hitting each other, but it has to convey information that the reader will absorb so that the story becomes richer. And then with the next scene, you're at the X Mansion, the danger room is working, and things go wrong. And the focal point of that moment is Kitty, who is 13, and she's reacting to it like a kid. Oh, guess we fucked up. Didn't say that, but oops. And I'm looking at all of this and I'm thinking, wow. And then when they're in San Francisco and Charlie's doing his mind thing, we established Aurora in the first scene wearing her outfit, looking very, Storm. But when we see her in San Francisco, she's in this totally African sensing, you sense it. It's like, welcome to Wakanda, with her hair under this gorgeous bun. You have no idea she's got silver hair, but you look at her and you say, she's not from around here. But that's the key. Every panel tells you what to do. But then after 26, 28 pages of the Avengers going up against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, suddenly we're at the mansion, and the Avengers plane is landing, and there's Carol, and there's Aurora, and there's Spider-Woman, and they're all wearing bathing suits. And again, this goes back to Michael's storytelling. Jessica's wearing a suit that was established by Steve Lealoa in her book. So, whoa, continuity. That's cool. Yeah, because she only has one bathing suit. What are you going to say? Aurora's in this barely legal bikini because she's Aurora and she doesn't understand the need for swimming suits anyway.
Sure.
But there's Carol. Carol is 30. Carol is a line officer in the Air Force, which is probably the most conservative of our services. She looks so respectable. And suddenly, with that one panel, boom, you get all this information about who they are. Don't need to write any of this. You don't need to say any of it. It's right there in front of you. And we move on from there. We see when she's telling them what happens, she's a back shot because we need to see the Avengers' reactions. We don't need to see her. We know how she feels.
Mm-hmm.
And then it builds to the point where she's talking about Magnus dying, and Thor comes over and says, "Oh, how horrible that you lost the man you love." And she just turns around and slams him in the face. Well, think about it. If you slap Thor in the face, who's going to get hurt?
Oh, clearly you.
If you slap him in the face hard enough to actually move him, how hard has she swung at him? This is a primal moment. This is primal confrontation. She's telling them bluntly, you guys screwed up. None of you ever asked, what's going on here? Is this what it seems? You just took it all at face value. And my point was, you can't do that. You're superheroes. You have a responsibility to look past the obvious and see if everything is legit.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, great. Then you can have a party. But if it isn't, your job is to find out what's wrong and fix it. And what she says basically is, you didn't fix it. I lost everything. I'm gonna get on with your lives. But you're still the Avengers. This is gonna happen again. Hopefully not to one of you. But you've got to do what you guys are supposed to do and fix it. And that's what, for me, was something that needed to be said. But it's also what, for me, superheroes are all about. If you're going to be a superhero, find out what's wrong and do your best to fix it.
You see, by the way, I've never. Thank you for that explanation. Let me see. Heather Ness.
Well, go get a new copy and read it again.
That's what's going to happen now. Again, we're getting lots of comments here. Heather Ness says, Chris, the X-Men have been the most meaningful characters and stories to me since I was 9.
Thank you.
Lots of people saying thank you. Let me see. Jeffrey Grant has a question. Is it true that the new Teen Titans were not the original choice by DC to be in the intercompany crossover with X-Men?
That's a DC question. I'll have to ask them. I have no idea.
By the way, my second favorite X-Men story. That comic is amazing.
Well, I mean, come on. I was working with Weezy Simonson, who is, from my perspective, the best editor in the business, except maybe for Stan. And Walter Simons, who is one of the best artists there is. I mean, okay, here's a little story. So Weezy and I are in her office, and back when we could actually visit the office, back when editors could actually take creators out for, what's the word? Lunch. Back when you didn't need to wear, do you realize the entire population of the United States is now bad guys?
We
all walk around with the bottom of our face covered.
Yeah.
So, and, I assume when you're walking around with all of this and you're carrying massive artillery, as many states do, at what point are you tempted by a bank?
Well,
at what point
I'm here.
It's here. I'm here. What the heck? Actually, the intriguing thing is, that's a story, if I were writing Batman, I would play with.
That'd be great.
Because poor Batman has got the wrong side of his head covered now.
Clearly, right? He's not practicing good social distancing.
I mean, imagine Wonder Woman having to go around with it, which, I'm curious. The next season of TV is, when you're looking at something, for example, like Blue Bloods, is everyone going to have to walk around wearing face masks?
Fiction's going to be fascinating over the next year or so, isn't it? Like TV and
movies and TV are going to be fascinating because none of them are probably going to get back into production until, past November. I don't think no new season is going to come out until next year, but that's a whole different thing. But anyway, what were we talking about? What was it was all, that's my problem. I keep
That's okay. Myself. I have a question here on Facebook about Dazzler. Michael.
Oh, God.
Michael Anderson writes, Chris, you wrote an incredibly fragile, conflicted, fun, and finally confident Dazzler. What inspired you to give her the layers of depth you did, and what did you not have a chance to do with her?
Well, the original joke was she was supposed to be black.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah,
when the Dazzler concept was bouncing around, everybody at Marvel had just seen, I think it was the last Bond movie with Christopher Walken. So they took one look at, where they tried to blow up San Francisco.
It's got Grace Jones. Yeah.
So they thought, that's a cool super character. And I mean, if you're gonna be, well, let's face it, singing and dancing are the two more challenging elements of comic books. I mean, A, a lot of writers aren't lyricists, and B, all you can do is have a couple of notes at the beginning and the end of dialogue lines, and the reader hopefully can fill in the gap themselves. But we can't hear them sing and we can't see them dance. So it's going to be hard to convey what Dazzler actually does for a living. So, and we both figured, hey, we could use another black character. I mean, why should Aurora be the only one to have fun? How more interesting would it be if we threw in her face a contemporary black urban, again, we're talking the early 80s, woman? That would lead to some interesting conflicts, or challenges, let's say. So we were going that way with Grace Jones, and then apparently Marvel was approached by representatives of oh God, blonde running down the beach in
Bo Derek.
Bo Derek, thank you. See, you have a much more appropriately oriented brain than I do, or I'm just an old fart. And the attitude was, holy cow, we'll get to meet Bo Derek, and whammo, she was a blonde. And then, of course, once Marvel had made its commitment and the Dazzler was in production, the deal fell apart. So, the X-Men was sort of the natural place to introduce her because we were the best-selling comic at Marvel, if not the industry. So we got the 2-issue, the green light for a 2-issue story, and it went on from there. But again, the idea was she's totally different from anything they know. Mm-hmm. And that was what we were working from. But again, she went from that story to her own book, and that's where things started to get complicated, because when Michael and I created Rogue, she had these 2 white stripes down the side of her hair, but Michael clearly drew her as a kid, someone in their teens. But more mature artists who were given, like Dazzler, oh, she's got white hair, I got white hair there too, she must be my age. And suddenly Rogue was a 50-year-old, which kind of changed the dynamic a lot. So we fixed it when she came back to the X-Men. But that's why the stripe moved up to the center of her head, because we figured no one can screw that up.
Yeah.
Please. But that's also why when Paul was drawing her and she actually bailed on the Brotherhood and came to the X-Men for help, the note for him was, she is a teenager. Make her look there. Let us see that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And because Paul was brilliant, he did. And it did. And it was cool.
Well, speaking of Rogue, another Chris has joined us, Chris Brumley. Again, this is the conclave of Chris's today. This is timely, and we'll finish on this. Chris, what X-Men character or what X-Men do you feel would have the hardest time social distancing right now with COVID-19? And who do you think would have the easiest time, not counting Rogue?
Well, Colossus, if he stayed armored.
Yeah, didn't think about that.
Well, I mean, any superhero, because they're always costumed head to foot, and it's basically armor, so there are actually no awkward moments, unless, of course, you were going to deal with kissing. Iron Man would probably have the easiest time.
Oh, so easy.
I mean, yeah, Rogue is sort of a cheap answer, but bear in mind, none of them cover their faces. So in terms of the X-Men, it would be a challenge because their whole raison d'etre is you have to trust us, therefore we will show our face, which is exactly what one shouldn't do. Again, the problem I have, or the challenge I would see in terms of the X canon in the modern age is if thanks to Krakoa, one is just growing plants all over the place that will provide antidotes for any disease. The next question would be, why then can't it deal with Krakoa? I mean, can't it deal with
oh yeah, there's that,
the disease? On the other hand, the logical place to take all this is that the virus did not come from a Chinese lab. The virus came from a Krakoa tree. Why? Because Magneto's tired of waiting. The only people affected by the virus are non-mutants. Therefore, bye-bye, our world now.
Marvel, if y'all are listening right now.
Well, but then you have to take it to the next step, which is how do the X-Men respond to that? Assuming, of course, they're still the X-Men, because apparently everybody goes into, if they suffer a fatal attack, they're reborn from Krakoa's seedlings. Is that not the case?
I think it's 5 other mutants that they can use their powers together
to bring you back.
To bring you back, yes.
So presumably a lot of the characters have been regenerated this way at this point. But if they're brought back, are they themselves, or are they tweaked to make them more simpatico with corporate desire? So who's, again, this goes back to the Genosha story, where, you know, they're supposedly turned into work, slaves.
Yeah, slave labor.
Yeah, except that, well, it gets too complicated then. I mean, there are all sorts of different ways you can take this. And then, you have to answer why, can there be a conflict between those like Kitty, who apparently can't be rebooted or haven't been rebooted, and those who have been? Again, asking the question, when you're ruling, when the land is inhabited by a number of significant and ambitious former antagonists, who do you trust? Where do you go from there? But again, this is why the scene that originally got cut from the Magneto I did last year, which is in the 3-page gap between the opening scene where he meets Kate at the coffee shop, and then when he confronts Warden and her crew to rescue the kids. There's a 3-page sequence, which in the printed edition is Magneto working out in the danger room to build up his skills fighting the X-Men. In the original script, he was on Mars.
Oh,
why is he on Mars? Because he's Magneto. He's Magneto. He's terraforming. And as he puts it, it'll take a generation, maybe 2. But when it's done, we'll just all move up here and tell everybody on Earth, you've got Earth, we've got everything else. Don't piss us off. We'll drop rocks on you. But my point was, when you're at that power level as Magneto, as the X-Men as mutants are, and you're clearly not welcome in the neighborhood, you could always find another neighborhood. You don't even have to go interstellar. You can just go to the planet next door.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody anyone wants to get stroppy about it, find an asteroid that's maybe solid gold or iridium or other precious metals. There are a lot of them out there. And just gently lower it to Earth and say, okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you this asteroid. You give me lots and lots and lots of money, with which I will buy things. There are all sorts of interesting real world ways to slide around A, antagonists, and B, conflicts. But for me, the key is find a way to resolve these conflicts in a manner that readers can readily understand. If you're talking about paranoia over a virus, is there a way within the comic to creep you out about its origin and further the conflict and present your primary characters with moral choices? Because the whole thing is not, it's having a moral choice. It's not automatically assuming we're the good guys and moving on from there. It's figuring out what being the good guys, the good people, because guys aren't, it's not all guys, but where we go from there. How do we get to that point? What are the consequences of decisions, right or wrong? Going back to Illyana for a moment, this is what Bill and I were exploring with the New Mutants. It only took us 32 years last Christmas, is Illyana knows what she is. She is a demon. Her core is a demon, but her soul is a demon, but she doesn't want to be a demon. She wants to be Kitty's best friend. She wants to be a good member of the New Mutants. How do you fight your soul when your soul is evil? How do you resist? Well, she's got to find a way. And the mutants are there to help her. But the conflict is hers. It's hopefully one that we can, as readers, can all relate to. I have a good side. I have a bad side. The good side is so tempting. But that's why I was looking forward to having Magneto as headmaster, because she looks at him and sees herself, but he won. And he looks at her and says and thinks, she's what I am tempted by. Power unrestrained, against which there is no defense. I want to be her. But Charles trusted me.
Yeah.
And damn it, I can't betray my friend. I can't betray the kids. I want to be Magneto, but I will strive to be a good man. So, that to me is, oh, look, conflict. Whoopee! Anyone can write or draw a bad guy. The trick is creating a conflict that makes the reader want to turn the page, to see how he or she gets out of it, and then to buy the next comic, the next issue. Because if we don't have that response, what the hell are we doing there?
Chris, I've always felt like you don't write characters, you write people. And what you just said, I mean, you drove home that point. And I hope any aspiring writers out there were taking notes. And
I hope aspiring editors were taking notes.
Aspiring editors, importantly. So we are at the end of our time. Is there anything? Where can people find your work right now? I know you've got God Loves, Man Kills coming out again. What's coming down the pipeline for you?
Your guess is as good as mine. Marvel's been shut down for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. We're in a strange new world where, you guys are, I hope, open and will be doing well. I guess Florida will be open and doing well. New York isn't quite in such a rush, with absolutely valid reasons.
Yeah.
It will be interesting seeing. I mean, for me, again, the fascination is when books come back to the marketplace, they'll be 5 months out of date. And those are a very significant 5 months in what we as a world, as people, are aware of. And the problem then becomes it'll take another 3 months or more for any stories derived from what's happened to come together and see print. Will there be changes? If so, to the reality in comics? If so, what will they be? Where will they lead? How will they manifest? How will the writers and the artists rise to the challenge, to the creative challenge? I don't know but to me, that I would be eager to see. I am eager to see where things go from here, and how, because we are a commercial medium, how those stories impact on the audience, and what makes them want to come back and see more, see what happens next. It is, as all of a sudden, a whole new world and a whole new reality. And can we respond to it? How will we respond to it? I know my answers are brilliant, therefore, but there are a lot of other writers. What roads will they lead down, and how eager and satisfied will we be to follow? That's the challenge every generation faces. That's my response back in the day, 50 years ago, was that. What happens next? Grant's was his response 25 years later with New X-Men was breathtaking in its own era. Oh no, it was, God, at the turn of the century.
Yeah, back in 2000.
But Alan Moore's was extraordinary with Watchmen. Each generation finds its voice. So what'll be the next voice? How will we react to it? Will we cheer? Will we say, I'm rooting for cheers because I want to read. I want this industry to go on, to prosper, to generate new spin-offs in other media. How will the next generation of Marvel films relate to what's happening now? That is what you call a breathtaking challenge, but out of breathtaking challenges can come, holy cow, far more breathtaking results. I mean, selfishly, I'd like to be part of that. Selfishly, I'd like to hit the ball out of the park. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well,
sorry, and I talk way too long.
No, you
My
don't.
apologies.
You can have as long as you want. I was just going to say that as someone who continues to draw inspiration from your work, and we have quite a few people watching now who do the same. Your work has taught us nothing if not that the power of hope. So I do remain hopeful, and thank you for that.
Well, I mean, last word, I hope. The people watching now, writing now, are what it's all about. It's reaching out to them, giving them characters and stories that justify the time they spend, which I admit in the last 4 weeks has probably been way more than any of us dreamed of. Reading the books, reading the stories, and thinking about the characters. And again, as I've been saying before, wanting to come back for more. You are what it's all about. You guys, you people, are why we're here. It's doing our best to excite you, to satisfy you, to tease you, and to make you, as I've been saying again and again, want to come back for more, because without all you guys, all you people, we're just self-indulgent people sitting alone with a typewriter in our back room going tap, 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 tap. And I mean, the thing I find most, that I regret the most over the last 4 months, the thing I look forward to the most is going to conventions, is meeting everybody, is hearing how they feel, good or bad, but going face to face with the audience that, God knows why, has been with me for 50 years. I mean, 3 generations, that is so scary to think, oh my gosh, I've got to keep doing my best to keep them coming back for more. How? By doing the best stories, the best characters I'm capable of, because I want each story to be worth your time and worth your investment, and each character to break your heart and make you want to see how we set things right. Because that's what I learned from Stan.
Chris, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, wait, I've got another 10,000 words to say.
You know what? We'll just have to schedule another one of these.
Works for me.
You just said we have to tease audiences.
But in between the teasing has to come a certain measure of satisfaction, which I hope, fingers crossed, God loves will provide. And, you know, at the end of the summer, after parts 1 and 2 have come out, I'm looking forward to hearing what all of you feel about the framing sequence, because both Brent and I felt when we did the original that we'd said it all, that it needed no more. And what surprised me, and I surprised him, and I hope surprised Tom Orzechowski, who lettered it, yes, we got the whole gang back together again.
Fantastic.
Is that I've got the chance to say something I hope new about the world that exists today. And in Kitty's case, the character that exists today. And I'd like to see what you think. Well, I'm really curious.
At the end of the summer, I will send an email to Beth, and we will talk about that.
God willing, and the creek don't rise.
Ladies and gentlemen,
wait.
Oh, there we go. Gotta get them glass shades on.
Hey, dude, this is great. Wonderful to talk with you. This is cool. Absolutely cool. I hope we should do it again. Oh, right, wait, we should do it again, right?
Again.
That's right. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I will keep my eyes peeled for Brian Bolland.
Thanks so much.
Don't hit me too hard.
I'll go ahead and end the stream now. Thank you.